Coping and seething is the name of the game this morning. Nintendo has announced their financial reports, and surprise to surprise, Switch is doing well, Pokemon is doing well, Zelda is doing well, and Switch 2 is not on the horizon. And obviously, a lot of people are upset about this financial report, and they're trying to damage control it. And I do think the two major points of contention at this point are the Switch's long-term viability and the Pokemon thing, right? And for today, first of all, the Switch. Okay. It's 10 million units away from outselling the PS2 and the DS, essentially. It is 100% going to outsell them both by this time next year, I would say. Maybe a couple of months, right? Maybe a couple extra months. But, I do think it's going to happen because I think it's going to be more apparent that the Switch 2 is not launching imminently, right? The console sales are not going to stagnate, and they're going to continue selling 10, 12 million units a year, right? Maybe they'll spike, maybe not, but they're doing well for themselves, okay? For themselves, right? That was obvious. Nintendo has won the console generation. I don't know why people are in denial about it, and there just is this very stubborn refusal to admit that their games are successful, right? That's the interesting thing I've noticed in this financial report is that all of these games that a lot of people said would fail, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Sword and Shield, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Pikmin 4, all of them have done exceedingly well, broken new records, set new ground, and are just huge hits in general. And I do think Pokemon is the really interesting aspect here because you're seeing a lot of people try to say that 24 million units isn't great, that the sales fell off a cliff at a certain point, that the game has bad word of mouth, and that simply isn't true at all. Same with Tears of the Kingdom, right? Same with Super Mario Bros. Wonder, right? The narratives against these games that the gaming journalism establishment tried to set against them, right? Tried to put out there, tried to push forward as the excuse not to be excited about these games. Mario's just a 2D platformer. It's going to be the last game on Switch ever, right? Tears of the Kingdom is just a rehash. Pokemon has really declined in quality and disappointed its hardcore fans, even though the people complaining are obviously not Pokemon players, right? That's been very self-evident for quite some time. I've been talking about this for a while, but I think it's become very evident in the past couple of months that the people who are just religiously anti-Pokemon, right? The people who say they're huge fans, but never buy any of the games, never watch the shows, never turn out for the spin-offs or praise Game Freak or the Pokemon Company for anything positive they do, right? The people who just complain and make stuff up about the company, that pervasive myth, right? That Pokemon doesn't change or evolve, right? People who push nonsense like that, people who say that the Pokemon Company doesn't do enough different, or that the games are outdated, or what have you. It's complete nonsense and always has been. I've been hearing this stuff since even while Pokemania was still a thing, right? I've been hearing this stuff forever, but to hear so many people stand by it so sincerely, right? Try and rally against Pokemon in this way, try to damage control its long-term success. And I think more importantly, try to downplay the fact that in spite of their best efforts, right, the best conspiracy they could possibly muster, right, in spite of everything they tried to throw at Gen 8 and Gen 9, both of them were huge hits, huge success stories, were highly successful, highly popular, and are still played and talked about today. Sword and Shield in particular, it's interesting to note, has sold a substantial amount since last year, right? After Gen 9 came out, right? So Gen 8 is still doing reasonably well after Gen 9's release, right? People don't accept this. People don't want to accept the fact that these games are this popular, right? And we've seen a lot of coping and seething about it. People like to say that it's just brand recognition or it's just fanboys or what have you, but the reality is Pokemon is legitimately good and it has maintained its audience, right? The conspiracies have done nothing to diminish the brand at all. And if anything, I do think this year is kind of going to mark the beginning of the decline of these kind of people, because it's becoming a lot like Gen 1ers, right? It's becoming a lot like the Gen 1er situation, right? Where, like, you had a lot of people who genuinely believed that, like, Gen 1 was the peak of Pokemon. That, like, they made 150 perfect designs and that everything after that was just not a real Pokemon, right? You know, the series peaked from the very beginning, right? And then the stereotype, you know, it led to people being critical of this mindset, you know, addressing the very real problems with Gen 1, like, addressing that, like, these people... The people who were saying this were just people who had who had jumped on a fad and, like, moved on from it and were never real fans, right? Like, people were getting to notice things about the Gen 1ers. And, like, I think by the time Gen 6 came out, like, they had completely been run off the internet. Like, these people just don't exist anymore because what they were spouting was so ridiculous and so absurd, right? To me, I think it's evident that the people complaining about Pokemon now, right, the Pretendos, like, whatever you call them, like, the Pokepals, I suppose we call them, like, when you look at what these people say, what they do, like, how they act, how they conduct themselves, like, it couldn't be more obvious that these guys are not real fans of the brand, right? They don't want the series to do well. They don't have any real, like, ideas on how Game Freak can improve or win them over or something, other than, like, some vague idea that, like, oh, they should change things. Like, change what? Like, they change plenty every generation. Oh, they should completely change the battle system, but they have spin-offs that do that. Oh, I don't want to play the spin-offs. Yeah, you don't, because you're not a real fan, right? You don't even, like, play on your Switch, honestly, to be completely bluntly honest with you. Like, the people I see doing this, like, are just people trying to find excuses not to support the brand. And I think more and more, like, the thing that interests me about this financial report, like, seeing Pikmin 4 do as well as it did, like, these guys are going to have a harder and harder of a time downplaying minor and Nintendo IPs, right? Because the traditional way to do it was, it's like, oh, those games don't matter, nobody plays them, they're niche. But then, like, we're seeing stuff like Pikmin and Fire Emblem do, like, 3-4 million units, which are, like, phenomenal, right? And the same people are going to turn around and like, call Pokemon niche at, like, 25 million units, like, a gen? Like, really? They're going to call that a failure? They're really going to try doing that, right? They're really going to try calling Pokemon, like, a failure. They're really trying that. And like, it's just not working anymore. Like, more and more, I'm seeing more people, like, try and pull stunts, like, oh, Fire Emblem Engage is a bomb, Advance Wars is a bomb, Tears of the Kingdom is a bomb, right? Like, all these major success stories, like, everything is a bomb to these people. And to me, I think that just goes to demonstrate just how out of touch these people actually are.